All right, Rob. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. Was Nick Chubb to blame for scoring that touchdown with a minute 55 left in the Browns' stunning and historic and embarrassing loss to the New York Jets?
Steve DeSager spoke to my class today, Chris, at USC.
Okay.
And he brought up, we talked about that game, and he had found a stat or something. Something like that hadn't happened in like over 20 years in the NFL where a team gave up a 13-point lead, in the final 2 minutes. He said it had been at 20 years. And it was the Browns who did it. I thought
this was like the first. Oh, right. You're right.
It was the Browns who did it.
I did. I think that was the only other time it may have happened. And so the Browns have done it twice.
They've done it twice in the last 20 years.
Unbelievable. When I lived in Cleveland, Rob, it was actually the glory days for the Browns. I mean, you obviously Jim Brown in the 60s, but since they've been in, the modern era, when I was there, those were the best years the Browns ever saw since Jim Brown. Ernest Biner, Kevin Mack, Bernie Kosar. They kept losing to Elway in the playoffs.
Right,
but
including
then,
the drive.
That one run,
that was the killer, the drive.
Yeah, the drive, right.
And Ernest Biner fumbling at the 1 or the 2 yard line, Chris.
Yep, I remember watching that game. Yeah.
And I'll tell you another one. They actually won this playoff game, but in 1986, if you could believe this, Mike Lupica got sick. Longtime columnist for the Daily News in New York. Lupica gets sick, and they send me to replace Lupica. Not to write a column, but just to be another writer at the game.
Okay.
I just thought I was 22 years old.
Like do a sidebar or something.
Yeah, just to get another story in the paper. They sent me out there, and Sam Rutigliano, you remember him, was the coach.
Yep.
That's how it was 1986, and they beat the Jets in overtime. The Jets were leading in the fourth quarter. The Browns came back, tied the game, and then beat them in overtime. But I'll never forget that was when the Browns were really good.
That would have been Kosar.
Yeah, Bernie Kosar.
Yeah. But Rob, since then, and even including the Belichick era, it wasn't good. And hasn't been good. And now I think Kevin Stefanski is a good coach. And we just got the news a little while ago from Isaac Lowenkron, the update guy. It was tweeted out by AP in Cleveland that they had a players-only meeting. And we'll get to the Nick Chubb situation. But they had a players-only meeting, Rob. I've got to believe, now I obviously could be wrong. We have no idea. I've got to believe, Rob, that players-only meeting is just about the players coming together and kind of, taking ownership for what happened. I don't think I do not believe it's a situation where they're bashing Kevin Stefanski or Andrew Berry for that matter.
No, because it was a comedy of errors.
It wasn't really. I mean, if you want to say, Stefanski should have told him, made sure he knew to not score, fine. But the defense, the players are the ones that gave up the 66-yard touchdown.
You can't let anybody get behind you for that. Right. That's the killer.
That's a player.
That's the game right there, Chris, because it's the quick score like that. If you make the Jets throw the ball in front of them, they have to eat the clock, and it's going to take time to score. Right. You don't mind them scoring one touchdown, but it can't be on one play.
Right.
That's the game.
And then after that, you give up the onside kick. With the rule changes, I mean, you hardly ever a team gets the onside kick. So I'm sure, Rob, that's what I think. Do you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I don't think it was a coach revolt against the coach. It was a comedy of errors, and that cost them a game that could hurt them later on in the year. That's no the thing.
Rob,
you got a home game against the Jets.
2-0 without Deshaun Watson. We know he won't be back for a while. But that's huge. I mean, if they're 500 with
they're in the driver's seat. They're in a great position.
He gets back. Absolutely. So that's what I believe this was about. But Nick Chubb spoke today, Rob.
We have the sound.
And he took blame for not scoring, for scoring on that play. Here he is.
I probably shouldn't have scored right there, honestly, looking back at it. It cost us the game. A lot of things went wrong, not just one thing, but collectively as a unit, as a team, we could have all did things different. But, I mean, it's only a problem because we didn't win, so I probably should have went down.
Yeah,
Rob, go ahead.
I'm just, Chris, I think he handled it the right way. Looking back on it, he probably shouldn't have, but it wasn't just that. It was a combination, and I think that's a legit, honest quote there where, you know what I mean, where he understands that, yeah, that probably wasn't the smartest play, but, man, we had to have 8 things go wrong to lose this game, and they all went wrong.
Look, I get it that, if he doesn't score there, chances are they don't lose that game. But, Rob, if he doesn't score there, or let me put it this way, if he did score there, which he did, chances still were that they don't lose that game.
Oh, I
you
get
said it. It's happened once in the history of the NFL before Sunday, and it was the Browns. And so I gotta be. Look, again, I get it, but I'm not putting any blame on Nick Chubb.
Because none, zero.
The way you said it, all the things that had to go wrong,
right,
for them to lose, even with him scoring. If that's the case, heck, maybe stuff like that would have went wrong had he not scored. Maybe they fumbled a snap. Maybe, you know what I mean? Like, who knows? I understand that people saying he shouldn't have scored.
Because then you eat up the clock by doing that. That's the big thing. I get it.
I'm just like, come on.
Which one is worse to you?
A minute.
The 66-yard touchdown.
The
right?
66-yard touchdown.
Is that the one
that's worse? The onside kick is worse.
So those two
much was worse.
Right.
You might even argue Kareem Hunt going out of bounds on the play. I think it was the play before.
Right. You don't go out of bounds. You stay in bounds.
Run.
So to let the clock run. I don't understand that either.
Because Chubb, Rob, all the other things you mentioned. You know what Chubb did that they didn't do?
Something
he
positive.
Increased the lead.
Right.
He increased the lead. He put 6 more points on the board. And Rob, we didn't mention missing the extra point. If they hit the extra point, they go to overtime with all the stuff that went wrong.
But this is the thing, is that the Jets were out of timeouts. And that's what they needed, Chris, to jumpstart their improbable win.
Right.
Without timeout, and that's why people are critical of Chubb, because they didn't have any timeout. It's harder to do. You know what I mean?
Right. But it became a 2-score game. And not even just 2 scores, not even a touchdown and a field goal. 2 touchdowns you needed. And they found, again, I understand the logic, but I'm not. I think Chubb was right. I think you're right that he handled it. He fell on the sword.
He did.
I'm sure in his mind he's like, man, come on. All the stuff that went wrong, but don't throw your teammates under the bus. Take it yourself and, just say we. And I like how he handled it. As much as I don't think he did anything wrong, that's how I would have handled it too. You don't go out there and say, look, I scored a touchdown. We're up two touchdowns. You know what I mean? He handled it right.
But didn't that give them, and you got to help
me. It did.
If he would have, because they had gotten the first down, correct?
Yeah. The first down was like the 2-yard line. So Rob, also he would have had to go down perfectly.
No, I know.
You know what I mean? Like,
I'm not saying it was
2 yards.
Exact science, but he could have stopped, got the first down, and then the Jets would have never touched the ball. They could have run out the
maybe.
clock.
But again, maybe.
No,
if the Browns found a way to lose up 13 with 1:55, and I hear you. I'm just, I don't know if I'm playing devil's advocate. I just don't. I'm sorry. I don't think Nick Chubb did the wrong thing.
Because we saw, do you remember, and Chris, you're a little younger than me, but the Joe Broussard, just a little bit, the Joe Broussard chick, Larry Zonka, botched handoff when all they had to do was kneel down, and that's when Herm Edwards picked up the ball for the Eagles and ran it in. I was watching that game as a kid, Chris, and I'll never forget the announcer who were doing the game. You know what he said? All the Giants have to do is kneel down on the ball and the game is over. Hand off to Zonka. I was like, they fired the offensive coordinator the next day,
No,
Chris.
it was right. It was crazy. But again, Rob, that play didn't put points on the board. You know what I'm saying? Like,
No,
Nick Chubb increased the lead to 2 touchdowns. And I hear what you're saying, but the chances, I mean, come on. He goes down. They don't have a timeout. There's no way they're losing that game. Rob, after he scored, wasn't everybody saying there's no way they're losing this? I was saying I had it on TV. I thought it was over, of course. And so, I don't think if he goes down, do I think, the comedy of errors ensues and they somehow lose that game? No. But Nick Chubb is not to blame. I'm sorry. I like that he took the blame. I like that he owned it, and even though I don't think it was his to own, but that was on all these other guys who took part in, the madness that ensued after he scored that touchdown. But that's me.